Samantha Harris has been researching the paranormal for over 14 years with experiences since she was a child. She obtained her BA in Communications with a background in abnormal psychology from Michigan State University. She is the founder and director of the Michigan Paranormal Research Association and runs an award-winning video production company and photograph company. She currently works in marketing for the University of Michigan. Samantha has been featured on the Travel Channel and Destination America, offered to direct sequel for A&E's Paranormal State. She's been contacted by My Ghost Stories, Weird or What, Paranormal Witness, and many other network productions. In addition to joining many radio show episodes, she has lectured at numerous universities, colleges, libraries, and conferences. Her book, which we want to talk about, is called Fighting Malevolent Spirits. She's going to continue her career in writing, and of course the website for Samantha and her group is www.michiganpra.com. So without any further delay, let's get her on the line. Samantha, good morning. Welcome to AM 630 and the Fringe Radio Show.
Hey, Pat and Carol, thanks so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
Well, thank you for being here.
Yeah, thanks for staying up late.
Exactly. That's what I was going to say.
Yeah, I was fighting it. I was like, I just want to go to sleep. So if I start talking about weird things, I'll just assume that I'm sleep talking this entire conversation. So,
No,
thank you guys.
No, thank you. Well, and this is the perfect time for this genre, without a doubt.
Oh, I know, right? It's weird things are happening when I'm talking to you guys. I'm going to go hide upstairs or something. But it's been interesting. With trying to communicate with our scheduling for the show and all sorts of weird stuff. It's not uncommon for me to have communication errors and weird odd events that just don't line up when I'm trying to kind of line up my clients for house blessings and things like that as well. So I thought it was kind of interesting that we had a really difficult time receiving each other's emails, all that other stuff. So it's kind of typical for me to experience.
Well, maybe the paranormal is getting in the way in some way, shape, or form, Samantha.
Right.
So anyway, I gave a little bit of your bio. Why don't you give our listeners a little bit of your backstory? You've been doing this for 14 years. I mean, what got you into this? And why don't you tell us about it? Love to hear it.
Yeah, it actually is kind of like a long history, but I'll try to condense it down so I don't bore everyone to death here. But ever since I was a little child, actually around like toddler age or so, I started having like psychic experiences, and it's actually something that seems to run in every single generation on my mother's side of the family. I don't consider myself actually like, a psychic or a medium. I think everyone has that ability to kind of tune into things, and we all have the ability to have that sixth sense. But, so I started like hearing things, seeing shadows, kind of experiencing stuff. And then I started having death premonitions and like premonitions with my dreams in general. They were almost like word for word accurate, and it kind of got a little bizarre. And it wasn't until, I would say, when I was in 7th grade, I actually attended, one of the 7th grade summer camps up in Michigan. It was off of Burt Lake. And it was a YMCA camp. It was called Camp Algonquin. And, after going there, I found out later it was haunted. But at that time, I had really no idea, but I captured this image of a woman, and it's like almost a full apparition of a woman, and it's appearing on top of a cork board. So the image is really interesting because I took it to a specialist who'd worked there for 30-plus years, and he's like, it's not a double exposure. It's actually in the negative. It's not a lens flare. It's not your reflection of you. And so it's definitely really interesting. And so after that point, that really piqued my interest in the research part of paranormal. And granted, I was about like 11 years old. And I like to think I was actually a pretty normal child, aside from my fascination with metaphysics. So every year I'd always buy these bunch of books about paranormal and do research about case studies and things like that. And I would say it was probably in high school when I started doing actual investigations. Starting out with like public cemeteries, things like that. And it was my senior year of high school, going into my freshman year of college, that I actually performed my first house blessing with what I believed to be was a demonic entity, which was residing at the home of a guy I was dating at that time. And kind of after that, I created my first paranormal group my freshman year in college. And then in about 2009, I created the latest one, which is a Michigan PRA group, and that was the most successful. I stuck with that one. I'm really proud of that group. And now we just kind of specialize in removing severe hauntings from people's homes and investigating.
Very interesting.
It is.
You well, obviously you were exposed to it at a very young age. Do you think that a lot of people, and I've asked this question so many times, but do you think that a lot of people that experience the paranormal, it kind of sort of like, a lot of people that have abduction scenarios or claim to have them? Do you think a lot of times it starts at a pretty young age?
Yeah, and there's different theories about that. I was actually talking to a colleague of mine about how it actually might relate to the wrinkles and the formation of wrinkles in the brain when you're a child, and as you grow older, those wrinkles kind of dissipate, and they're actually starting to link that to the possibility of how our perception and vision actually changes as we grow older, and it's kind of like sculpts our brain later on, so when we're younger, we're kind of more open to those things, and that we kind of are able to perceive more things. Same with like animals, although they have different rods and cones in their eyes and things. But yeah, I definitely think a lot of people have these experiences when we're children. But I'm also a big advocate for, I think it's also environmental. As we grow older, we're like texting and we're so ADD with our technology, and I think we just tend to tune things out, at least in our Western society.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and I think people, though, are becoming more and more open-minded about this type of stuff. I mean, we've said it so many times on this show, not too many years ago, talking about a lot of these fringe subjects, if you will. People didn't want to talk about it. I mean, they were just afraid, or they feel they get typecasted or labeled.
Yeah, well, it's kind of like a UFO. If you don't look up to the sky, you'll never see it.
Right.
But with the kids nowadays, I know what you're saying. Their heads in their cell phones and their computers and everything.
And everywhere else.
And I think back when we were younger, it was easier to pay more attention to things. And when you're younger, but as you get older, I think it's. Yeah.
Well, I think it's when you get older. It's and I've heard this several times too, especially with the abduction scenarios. A lot of researchers feel that our minds are kind of, I mean, we've kind of established our religion, we've established our traditions by the time we're in our teen years, but kids
they don't second guess themselves.
That's right, they don't second guess themselves, they don't worry about what people think. And what I always hear more and more from paranormal researchers and people like yourself that study this is that when young children talk about seeing their imaginary friend, maybe there's a little more to that than we realize.
Right, exactly. And the point that you made, too, about this being more of like a publicly open type subject, I think is absolutely wonderful. And it kind of creates a open line of communication for research more, with more people willing to open up about it. And I don't know if it's just because the increase in population and, communication methods, but it also seems that there's been a big increase in paranormal activity as well, too. So it's kind of interesting. So I don't know if it's just because it's being reported more often or if we actually are having an increase or not. But, yeah, I think they both kind of go hand in hand. It's definitely interesting.
Yeah, it is.
So now, are you located in the Detroit area?
So it's actually towards, if I would totally pull a Michigander move, I would show you my hand right now, and I would put my finger in the middle of my palm and tell you that I am actually, right outside of Lansing. It's a little small rural town, but, it's, right about East Lansing, where Michigan State University is.
Okay, gotcha.
We're about, we're maybe an hour away from Detroit or so.
Okay, gotcha. Because
I love her accent. I can tell she's.
Oh,
really,
yeah, you can tell.
I want to go back with your mom.
Yeah, we when I grew up as a kid, we had a summer home in the Saugatuck Douglas area.
Oh, neat.
Didn't realize going through your team's website how many haunted, well, I don't know if you want to call them haunted, but places that have paranormal activity. I didn't, it's like Utah. You don't think about it much, but and same with Michigan. Didn't realize there was so many places.
Yeah, there's a lot.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and it's not that Michigan's a really, really old state or anything like that with a lot more historical background. With at least with Native American historical backgrounds, but we have a lot of activity. It's always interesting. People kind of report that, in the colder months, they think the veil between worlds are thinning and things like that. And so I've always noticed that there's a kind of a big boom in requests and activity in the fall, at least for us as well, too. But, yeah, I mean, I meet people almost every day, if we're talking about the paranormal, if we have an interview or something like that, people contact me like, oh, my God, I thought I was the only one, but here's what I experienced, and I lived in this town, things like that. So it's kind of interesting to get everyone's feedback on where they grew up or where they had their experiences in Michigan, but definitely it's an active state, I guess I could say.
Yeah.
Exactly. One of our listeners, Bill in upstate New York, writes in for you, Samantha, and says, did any of your ancestors or family members have this gift to see the paranormal?
Yeah, and I've always wanted, I wish I could speak to my great-grandmother, who is late now, but my great-grandma Rose, she actually came over here from Germany when she was 19, but she is the one that I know as far back as that actually had this ability, too, and she could see things. She also kind of raised my mother, too, when she was a little girl. And I remember one time my mom was kind of behaving strangely, was watching things in the room that weren't really there, and kind of acting really upset and terrified. So, Grandma Rose kind of pulled my mom aside and was like, Michelle, like, are you okay? Are you seeing things that, other people aren't seeing? And, kind of inquired about it. My mom described what she was experiencing, and she kind of helped guide her. And she's like, well, we have a gift in the family, and I think that's what you're experiencing, and that it's okay. You don't have to be scared of it, but here's how you manage it. And kind of took her under her wing, which is really sweet, in a weird paranormal way. So, yeah, but, they saw all sorts of different things. And she, at the family farmhouse, actually, our family's German farm used to be in Sterling Heights, Michigan. But, yeah, they had a lot of paranormal activity, actually, on that farmhouse property. And they had a lot of family members that passed away there as well, too. So there was all sorts of activity, and they kind of just grew up around that environment and kind of just passed on their techniques and coping methods and ways to harness their abilities and stuff, and kind of just taught us that. So it's kind of neat.
Yeah, that is neat. That is
Gotcha.
pretty cool.
Now, with your group, obviously you founded the group. How long has Michigan Paranormal been around for?
Since 2009.
Okay.
And yeah, it's interesting because sometimes it functions as like a one-person show type thing where, I might just have a basic house blessing and I'll go and take care of that and I manage all the intake information and counseling with people. But with severe cases, I always like to have a partner with me. And actually, sometimes that varies between, using my mother or using my partner, Mike Best, but he's down in Indiana now, and all sorts of other stuff. So I've had a lot of serious partners in the group, but sometimes we all move to different parts of the state, and so it's goofy. So if it's a really severe case, as the ones that I featured in my book, I kind of pull together the whole team, and then we go and handle the severe cases together. So I think it's a better thing to approach with more people.
Exactly. Now, your mom, I was looking at your mom's bio, and it said that she does a lot of historical research. She's a historical research specialist. When you go into these different places, Samantha, of course, it's kind of at least a lot of the paranormal researchers we've talked with, a lot of them like to go in with not a lot of knowledge, especially if there's some sort of activity there, to be able to experience it firsthand. But that's kind of fun when you can dig into a place, especially some of these old places with a ton of history.
Right, exactly. To me, if I was practicing as an intuitive or a medium or a psychic medium, I wouldn't want to have that information ahead of time. I'd like to go in there kind of with a cold approach that, know nothing and really test myself, which, I don't really focus in that kind of line of work. But in terms of investigations and stuff, if you are already aware of, say, the deceased member's name or historical background in the case and things like that, too, it's kind of interesting to see if anything comes up in context with the evidence that you capture. So, and I think it also aids the communication if you're dealing with, human spirits and stuff, being able to kind of communicate and be like, oh, you know what, that's interesting because, a suicide did happen. If the word suicide comes up on, any of the digital dowsing devices, things like that, too. So I definitely think it can aid in the process, but it's not necessary. You can always go in there and kind of start fresh with a clean slate and see what you get.
Yeah, I think it would work either way, and I think that's kind of good. It'd be interesting that'd be a fun job to find out stuff.
Well, yeah, because it is.
Because with our house, I'd like to find that history out of.
Well, and with the internet, you can. There's more. It's easier now, but some of these historical sites and stuff like that. When you pull back the covers on a lot of this stuff, you realize that. Maybe some of them, not necessarily all of them, some of them have paranormal activity going on. When you dig into the history of them, you find out people committed suicide there, or somebody was murdered there, or there was abuse or something like that. That's it. It can be a little scary, but it's fun too. That's all part of it.
Right, exactly. And sometimes it helps too, because mostly the cases that I work on or specialize in are with the what I call inhuman spirits or demonic hauntings, or the belief that these things are fallen angels. But it's interesting to see the history of a property. So say, for example, the family's kind of suffering with alcoholism and some sort of severe emotional disturbance as well, or habit, because a lot of the families I deal with are severely dysfunctional, and they've got a lot of stuff going on. It's interesting to see if the history of the place shows somewhere that, maybe we're able to talk to the neighbors or find out the history of the previous owners. And sometimes it's interesting to kind of see the personality traits or addiction traits. Like, say, the previous owner was also an alcoholic. And, sometimes I think that the energy of that habit or addiction is imprinted in the home. And so sometimes I think it rubs off on, the next person that inhabits the house, or possibly they inherited the haunting and then kind of take on the same characteristics. So it's kind of interesting as well, too.
Yeah, that is interesting, because sometimes you go into, have you ever been into a house that's just dark no matter what? You open the lights and you just get a feeling like it's not, that you can just tell it's, that's...
Well, and that's a question for you with demonology, Samantha. There's a lot of... we've had a lot of paranormal researchers on the show, and a lot of them don't want to go down that corridor a little bit, but then there's some that, and it sounds like you, and we'll talk about your book too, but that they, I don't want to say they enjoy it, but they kind of understand it. And do you find that with your group and with your research that you find a lot of, do you find a lot of demonic spirits or demonic beings, or is that not the norm so much?
Yeah, this line of work, it's like a double-edged sword in a way. It's very rewarding to help people, but it really has changed my life. It has altered the safety of myself, those around me, my animals, things like that. It's changed the way I sleep, different stuff like that. We could talk about that too. But yeah, definitely. I think demonic hauntings, in my opinion, are actually fairly rare. But the way it's kind of set up, at least for my website and my kind of networking with other people, is that I typically am handed kind of the worst-case scenario cases in which, maybe the clients have been turned down by their church, or they've had kind of like a botched house blessing, and they've tried every single method, and they're just not able to get any help. And that's usually those are the people that I usually are put in contact with. So it's definitely rare and unusual, but that kind of is what I deal with the most often. It could be anywhere from, all around the state of Michigan to, like, the Midwest region, things like that. But, for a while, I, would have cases for every weekend, and it was kind of busy. But it's just because I think it got narrowed down, and I kind of got handed the worst of the worst case scenarios, and people already kind of shuffled through the cases and were like, well, we don't feel like dealing with this, so here's this case if you want to work on it, kind of thing. And so I just usually get those handed to me and just kind of work on them. But yeah, it's definitely rare and unusual. I don't want people to think like, just talking about demons or reading about them, it's going to conjure some terrible spirit or whatever. And that's not how it works, and it is rare. So I don't want people to live in fear of that, and worst case scenario, you can always try to get rid of it, things like that too. So yeah.
Have you encountered some pretty horrific things with all the work that you've done? Have you encountered some, was it benevolent spirits or attachments that want to follow you out of there?
Right. Yeah. There's definitely what is it? Well, that's actually why they tell the book like malevolent spirits, because it reminds me of Maleficent, actually, from the Disney movie that they're remaking with Angelina Jolie.
Right.
Oh, I can relate. So, but yeah, some of the cases I dealt with, it's like, each case honestly takes its own toll from you. Like, I don't know how to explain it, and I think Maureen Warren nailed it when she just said that each case really takes a part of you, and it does. I've had, it's kind of interesting now, usually before I get a request for help or house blessing with a demonic case, I usually have like horrific nightmares the night before, and I know this sounds crazy, but like in the dream state, I actually encounter this entity or these entities, and it's kind of like duking it out in the dream world. And then I'll wake up, and usually there's an email like, help, I think I have a demon, or, I have a really severe haunting. My son just got thrown across the room, and it's definitely severe. And so it's kind of interesting kind of keeping a track record of how many times that's happened versus how many demonic cases I've actually had to work on as well, too. But, yeah. I've had at least 2 times, aside from these like visions and nightmares and things like that before a case, I've had at least 2 different occasions where I believe I had an entity visit me in my home right before a house blessing the day of, in an effort to kind of scare me off, I think, because they really don't want these families and clients receiving help, because they kind of feed off of them. They're basically like bullies. And so if you're there to help the family, you become the bad guy in the demon's eyes. So they don't really like that, and they'll kind of do anything to prevent you from proceeding with that. So, and I just had like weird bad events, like in the summertime, I was working on a case, and ironically, it was really early in the morning, like 5 or 6 in the morning, summertime though, and I had like a highway sign impaled my windshield like 4 inches from my head right before dealing with a demonic case. So, weird bad events over the last 2 years since I've focused in on this work more. So it's definitely interesting. But yeah, I mean, I saw an entity actually run through my living room into my kitchen while I was in the bathroom, and it wasn't. I shouldn't even say run. It was like darted. It was like a. And I know I sound crazy saying this, but we have a good audience for this. But literally this thing was like 7, 8 feet tall. I mean, it was massive. And it wasn't even in my peripheral vision. I was just blow drying my hair, and I remember the hairs on my the whole body stood up, and I knew exactly what it was. I'd never seen anything like that before, but I'd read about it. I was getting ready for a house blessing that morning for a very, very severe case. That case actually took the life of several animals and pets in the family and caused a bunch of divorces, and whole family was falling apart basically. But I saw it, basically shoot through the living room into the kitchen, and I threw down the hairdryer and went in there and just kind of like, in the name of God, you have to leave, blah blah blah, and just kind of kicked it out. But I still showed up at the case, and couldn't back down for this family because they were desperate.
So was it a dark? Was it like just a dark?
Killing animals, huh?
Yeah, right. Yeah, I mean, sometimes they lost their chinchilla. They also later on lost their dog. I've had a lot of cases where, you could write it off as coincidence, but right, exactly. After a veterinarian's examination, though, they're like, I can't explain this. We've had several deaths like that where they took their animals to the vet and like, what happened? And they're like, we're not really sure. But yeah, where they lose dogs. I've had women have miscarriages, things like that, where it just could be just a line of severe, unfortunate events. But to me, it kind of all comes together in a pattern, and I kind of see that. It's a little
bizarre, especially when it's more than one pet. It's
right.
And it's different things that happen to them. Was it a dark entity that ran? Or what did it look like?
Yeah, I mean, it was like this dark, tall, shadowy. It was like Sunzo, which is because I've also seen shadow figures, and to me those were kind of like omens when I was a little kid, like before my grandpa passed away. He got an overdose of chemotherapy. I remember seeing this like more human-shaped shadow figure kind of sink through the floor. My sister and I both saw it at the same time when we were little, and that just flipped us out. But this was tall and lanky. There wasn't like a definite. There was not a lot of definition to it. It was almost like this clouding mass, but it was like a humanoid figure, if I could explain it that way. And it was just like fast, and
I don't think you're crazy. I've seen one too a couple years ago, so it was pretty amazing. Pat was like, "Are you sure?" I'm like, "Yeah, I know what I saw."
What do you think? What do you think about shadow people? It seems that children seem to experience that. Do you? In some, again, just going through the different cases, some children seem to be afraid of them, and others are somewhat attracted to them or not afraid of them at all.
Right. I mean, I know, of course, it's like theories too, but I'm not really sure. When I had experiences with them, it was uncomfortable, the feeling I got from them. It wasn't like necessarily a good thing. I kind of talked about, being omens and just weird things that would happen before preceding someone's death. So to me, at least from my personal experience, and that's all I can really go by, is like it wasn't really a good energy. I didn't really like it. But at the same time too, it's possible that they just exist on some other energy level or wavelength frequency, and so maybe we just perceive them as a shadow figure, but they might not necessarily be like a negative spirit or entity. But then you have people that see spirits in full apparition, as a human would appear. So yeah, so it's interesting. And some kids, don't seem to be bothered by it at all. Other kids seem to be like terrified by it, and that was kind of like along the experience for me. I was kind of creeped out by them.
I ran when I I saw it. I was on my bed and it went across the ceiling and it was like a black shadow and it was light and I ran out the door.
Right? And yeah, it reminds me of something out of Ghost.
I jumped up and I ran and I'm like thinking, what am I running from?
Yeah, exactly. And it reminds me of that scene where that guy is being taken to hell or something in Ghost with all the shadows.
Yes.
Well, that's what. Yeah, it's really weird, but that's why I was like, oh my gosh.
We got a couple questions emailed in for you, Samantha. One of them is, it says, why does Samantha think that these spirits haven't moved on, and where does she think our spirits go in the afterlife?
So I can answer that in two different parts, I guess. If he's talking about spirits being like demons, or if he's talking about human spirits, because
human spirits.
Okay, yeah, I was going to say, because in my line of work, I really do believe there is a difference. I know a lot of people believe that, some spirit, like all spirits are demonic entities, and I just don't follow that same line of thought after research and personal experiences, Well, there's many different theories, and the top main, like 3 or so, is that one, a lot of the people, when they died, sometimes there was like a sudden event, like a car accident, or they were murdered, something traumatic like that, where there wasn't a gradual process of dying or crossing over. It's so sudden and traumatic for them, they don't realize that they're dead. So they kind of haven't put 2 and 2 together to really realize that, they've actually passed on. 2 is that a lot of spirits, feel like they have unfinished business. Maybe they wanted to watch over their son or their family, or maybe, they left some hidden treasure, or something goofy like that. But, they have some reason to feel like they still need to be here. They still need to be part of this living world. Another kind of big top theory was also that, some spirits are honestly afraid of, like, crossing over. Maybe they didn't, they might have this perceived thing of like Judgment Day, whether it exists or not. And so they're kind of afraid and apprehensive about, crossing over into the light or actually making that transition because maybe they didn't make the best choices in this lifetime. So, I can understand that fear because, you kind of have that fire and brimstone type thing and then a different views of, if God's forgiving or not kind of thing, or Great Spirit, Allah, whatever divine creator that they believe in. But yeah, so there's different theories about that. But I also believe, and have documented a lot of different cases of actual residual hauntings. And that's just basically like a record playing. So if you think of Gettysburg, I don't think they're actually like intelligent hauntings most of the time there. It's kind of like footage is being played over and over again on a tape reel or a film reel of that entity's life. And so basically that spirit's kind of reliving what they went through. And so it's kind of like a memory that you're watching.
Very, very interesting. We've got to take a quick commercial break here in a minute. Let me go ahead and give you another question, let you think about it a little bit.
Sure.
It says, has Samantha ever encountered something that couldn't be explained as a spirit that left her wondering whether it could be a dimensional being or even an extraterrestrial?
Ooh, okay, I'll think about that while we take a break.
Let's go ahead and we're going to do that. We're going to take a break here in just a minute. Our guest tonight is Samantha Harris. We're going to talk about her book on the other side. It's called Fighting Malevolent Spirits. I want to talk about that as far as what kind of drove you to put that together. And, of course, her website is MichiganPRA.com, stands for Michigan Paranormal Research Association. Go check it out. They've got a lot of great EVPs and videos and stuff like that on there. All right, everybody, welcome back to the Fringe Radio Show. Our guest tonight is Samantha, or this morning, I should say, is Samantha Harris. Samantha, thank you so much for staying up late and being here with us.
Oh, yeah. Well, thank you guys for having me. Sorry if I'm not making any sense. I didn't know if I was stumbling through this.
No, perfect sense. So the question before the break was about could they be interdimensional or extraterrestrial?
It is interesting, and I've had people kind of propose the theory that, are demons actually extraterrestrials? But in terms of the first part of the question, like, have I ever experienced something that I think was interdimensional? And I definitely think so. I've had a case that was actually in Brighton, Michigan, where this guy was describing all these interesting experiences and, like, sleep paralysis, and was describing the physical characteristics of the entities they were seeing, and it basically matched the lines of, being along the lines of, like, the Greys with the aliens. It was really interesting. And so I was like, I don't know how much I can help you, but, let's try a house blessing. Let's kind of clear the energy out of here and put up some, spiritual barriers for you. And interestingly enough, to help with that, but this guy checked out on a psych evaluation. I don't think he was hallucinating. Very interesting experiences. But yeah, he would have several like little tiny figures in his room with, and clearly defined bodies, things like that didn't really match demonic hauntings. Because, with demonic hauntings, you can have little tiny shadows, big tall things, and they're kind of shapeshifters. But this guy was describing something exactly along the lines of what you would think of the little tiny green men. So
right.
It's kind of interesting. And, not that I've experienced Sasquatch, but I definitely think Bigfoot would explain a lot of things if it really was found out that, this spirit animal thing was really an interdimensional being. Why we don't find any of the skeletal remains, any younger versions, like a baby Sasquatch, as goofy as that sounds. So I think that's definitely possible, and a lot of Native Americans believe that Sasquatch basically is a protector of the land and actually is able to kind of jump in between worlds, the physical world and the spiritual world, and that's why we're not able to really fully interact or track the entity. So I think it's very interesting. But yeah, and I've personally seen things like UFOs, and actually hometown, Dexter, Michigan, we're actually in some like big UFO encyclopedia, and actually live just a road down from where they had all these UFM science trucks and military trucks go out there to examine some UFO type imprints that were in a cornfield, and it was actually so hot it turned the sandy parts of it into glass. So it was very interesting. So yeah.
Very interesting. Another thing, we got a bunch of questions sent in for you. Another question is, Samantha, have you encountered orbs, and what do you think these things are?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, most people actually don't see it with the naked eye, but I remember when I was telling you about that first demonic case that I handled when I was about 17 or 18, I think it was 17, I was dating that guy. I remember actually we were watching The Exorcism, Emily Rose, ironically, and, so we're probably already scared, but I remember very, very specifically, I saw this actual black orb, and this is after things started to escalate with his haunting and things started to follow us home, even back to my parents' home. So it was a little iffy, but we were actually at my parents' house that night, and I remember specifically seeing this black orb shoot up out of the carpet and into the closet, and it was like 3 times the size of like a bumblebee, and it didn't make a single sound. It was in the middle of winter. There's not bugs that big flying around here in Michigan in the middle of the winter, and, I tore apart the closet. I was just like, I really wanted to feel assured that, it was just a bug, calm myself down, and I honestly couldn't find any explanations for it. So, but yeah, I mean, orbs are definitely a big debatable topic. Yes, oftentimes it's dust or debris, or the water crystals in the air, and sometimes like light reflections or lens flares. So you have to really pick it apart. But I do think there's been some occasions where I've captured something that I can't explain, especially on video in the infrared security camera setup, where it seemed to have a flight path of intelligence. It would move around and interact with team members. So it was really interesting, and it definitely didn't behave like dust. So yeah, so I think it's possible. I think it is a spirit manifesting itself. Same with ectoplasm, and I think they're kind of along the same line or concept of energy manifesting itself.
Very interesting. Mm-hmm. Another question for you is, and this maybe this will go right into what you work on and do. It says, what do you think of all the ghost hunter reality shows? And do you think that some of them are making a mockery of the seriousness of researching paranormal activity?
Right. I think that's a great question, too. I mean, all these questions have been great, so I appreciate that. Yeah, I think it's interesting. Dealing with Hollywood, I mean, I was offered, like, numerous shows, and I just really did not want to participate in it. And the one that I was offered, granted, this is the same production companies that created, like, Laguna Beach, and things like that. They were about to create a Hot Girls in the Paranormal show, and I'm like, nope, I'm absolutely not doing it. But in the contract, they're like, you might need to reenact evidence and even possibly fabricate stuff. And because it would be such a disservice to my fellow researchers and those working in the paranormal field, I just had to refuse that, because I don't want to bring any sort of false information or evidence into the field. Like, I want to approach this in a very serious way. And yeah, so there's a lot of these shows, like Hollywood will basically corrupt anything that's trendy, especially the paranormal. And I remember when that show Extreme Paranormal came out, and they were doing a lot of very controversial things on television regarding, like summoning a demon on TV. And I'm like, this is a terrible idea. And, you have the youth watching, and they're very, you can impress impress upon them and print on them very, very easily. So I think it's definitely a subject and topic that really needs to be respected on TV shows. And so I'm actually working on a possible upcoming TV show. I've got several production companies interested, and I finally found some people that actually might be interested in working with because they actually have ethics and morals, and it's like in terms of respecting this and actually believe in this field. And so that was actually very refreshing because it's kind of rare to find, at least with Hollywood. But yeah, I like a lot of the shows in terms of some of the evidence that they're gathering. I don't really believe in provoking entities. I think that's risky. And I think there should be a level of respect, especially if you're dealing with human spirits. You wouldn't trash talk someone that you just met on the side of the street, and I think that should be applied in the paranormal as well.
Yeah,
exactly. Well, the thing is, like, we've heard the question so many times about the reality shows, and it's, I think that on the good side, a lot of them kind of, again, it's kind of like our radio show. It's about being open-minded. It introduces people to it. And of course, they've got to throw a little bit of flash and pizzazz in there because,
right.
I'll be honest with you, I've never gone out and done any paranormal research. We've never done that. We've captured a few EVPs because I don't consider this, and I can tell just by the tone of your voice and with your group, you don't do this as a hobby. Most people that are serious about it, they're there to help people. They're there to help straighten out a situation. They're not in, go take up golf if you want a hobby. But I think that what's kind of happened is a lot of these shows, the market got so flooded with them, and some of them, literally are like Keeping Up with the Kardashians. It's not even. It is really making a mockery of it, and a lot of them are starting to fall off, which maybe not for those people that are in those shows, but to some degree, I think that's, there's some long-standing ones out there that have survived, but there's a lot of the flash in the pans that are going away pretty quick.
Right, exactly. And that's, I think, people have to approach it in a respectful manner, and that's exactly right. I always, I applaud people for wanting to research this thing, but like you said, if you want to take up a hobby, do golf, things like that too. Because, there's just so many groups out there, and I think that they're not really preparing themselves as well as they should or could, for their own safety and for the safety of those around them, too. And just the way that they, display and portray things on TV, they have to have that drama, but a lot of the times they'll try to do anything just to sell the topic itself. And so, I've seen a lot of goofy shows out there, too, and it is kind of a mockery of it as well. Especially with demonology stuff, I really hope that there's more shows coming out, or if I'm working on this show, that it's really taken like a respectful approach and to show the severity of it, and to really respect that line of field, because, I don't want people to get the idea like, oh, hey, this is all fun and games, because it's not. People have died. People have had very horrible things happen, and it's definitely a serious topic.
It's true. It's exactly right.
Let's switch gears a little bit, Samantha, and talk about your book.
Sure, yeah. Well, I just got published by Llewellyn. It definitely has been a 2-year process. Oh my gosh! So I had no idea it took so long, but I'm very happy with my publishers. They're wonderful people. They're the biggest metaphysical publisher, and they're actually based in Minnesota, which I thought was really interesting. But great people. They're all very spiritual, and I think that really shows in their quality of work. So I'm very, very happy to be working with them. But yeah, I originally wanted to name it Light Against the Dark. True demonic accounts and how to remove them, but it's actually titled Fighting Malevolent Spirits, the Demonologist's Darkest Encounters. And when I first wrote this book, basically I was running a wedding videography photography company full-time, and in the wintertime it just drops off. There's not a lot of business going on in the wintertime, so I had a lot of free time, and I had always wanted to write down some of my stories, whether it was for public viewing or not. But I just literally sat down for 3 or 4 months and just hacked away at putting together that book. And I don't, it's really a blur, actually. And this is kind of, so it's goofy, but, I was praying. I was like, God, if I'm supposed to even write this, I don't know if it's the truth or if it's supposed to help people or not, but, will you give me a sign that I should be doing this? And I had this really, really intense, lucid dream and vision about actually writing the book. And I was like, okay, I guess that's, a good sign. So I was like, all right, let's do it. And, I was working with a friend of mine who's a very talented medium, and she's like, you know what, I see you contacting someone called Lou Ellen, and she's like, it's Loulellen or something like that. I think it's a publisher, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, so I looked it up, and they were actually the first publisher I contacted, and they were the first ones to accept my materials immediately. And I set it up as being a self-help book because, like you said, helping people. I mean, that really is my number one priority. I don't charge for my services. I just ask for a donation. I'm basically paying to help these people, and I put my life at risk for these people. But so I really wanted a book to help people and to teach people that, I'm not anything special. Like, people can do this themselves, and I think that's a big misconception. I'm not saying any standard Joe, maybe who's like a drunkard or something should go and battle demons, because you need to be balanced too. You need to be kind of level-headed about it. But so I kind of had to reorganize the book so that it was set up as, in the beginning, Q&A type thing, and then there's about like 9 different cases that are very severe, but they're my worst cases that I've dealt with, and amazing things that I can't explain that I saw and experienced, along with the family stories. And then in the back is where they made me move the whole, like, how to do a blessing, how to prepare for that, some prayers and things that I use that are non-denominational. And so I had to reorganize it a little bit, do lots of editing. And so I've actually gotten great reviews. I was like flabbergasted by this the other day. Somebody wrote me, and she's like, I read that book in 2 sittings. She's like, it was like a huge page turner. She's like, I haven't read a book that quickly since The Hunger Games, and she's like, I like this one more. And I was like, oh my God. Yeah, so I was super excited about that.
You'll have to send us a copy. I'd love to read it.
Yeah, I would love to.
And then we'll get you back on.
And where can our listeners get your book at, Samantha?
Well, I will tell your listeners to save some money you can actually order it for like $3 off, I think, on Amazon. If you go to Amazon.com, Fighting Malevolent Spirits, it should be Samantha E. Harris on there. But also through Llewellyn.com, Barnes & Noble, and most of the major bookstores like Barnes & Noble should be carrying it as well, but it is cheapest on Amazon. And if you have Prime, it's a deal, so you get even cheaper, so that's good.
Are you gonna write any more books in the future, you think?
Yeah, I actually lost my mind, and I was like, maybe I'll write another book, cause it's just like a draining process, but it is kind of fun.
I love that. I don't mean to interrupt you, but I love the name of the name you picked, the first name of that. You should do another book on that if you do a sequel or something.
Right, that's what I thought. They're like, well, for marketing, I'm like, I'm telling you, people like this name, because I had other people be like, what does malevolent mean? And I'm like, well, it means nasty, bad spirits. So, but yeah, so this next book I'm kind of thinking about is on the lighter side of things. So I was thinking about doing a book about the dark side, a book about the light side, and then a third book possibly is like the gray stuff in between in terms of like my psychic abilities. And so kind of the lighter side, not like the meaning of life, because that's so arrogant to be like, I wrote a book about the meaning of life. but really like our...
No, I think you should. I think that's a really good idea, because it'll show, different, you can study it, because there's not many books on anything like that.
Right, exactly. And I just wanted to share like what I've learned from different mediums, from my experiences, from my kind of out-of-body experience that I had after surgery, what I kind of think are our spiritual lessons here down on Earth, like why we're here. And how to kind of master that and to kind of evolve yourself the best that you can in this life. So I'm hopefully going to be working on that. I started writing it a little bit. And, it's kind of weird. I've been meditating or trying to meditate. Life has been crazy hectic. And usually, like, I know it sounds goofy, but I'll just start having these thoughts come into my mind, and it's kind of like a quote or something like that. And then each chapter kind of fills in further about that.
Yeah, that is
kind of
cool.
Interesting. Well, thank you.
That's cool. I think you should do it, and then we'll have to get your book, read it, and get back on it. Because I'd like to hear about your out-of-body experience and stuff too, but we're almost out of time. But sounds awesome.
Yeah, I would love to come back on sometime. So you guys have a great show. This is exciting.
Now, do you have some events coming up? I see you're going to be up in Ontario.
Yeah, we're actually going to be doing the Western Canada, I think, Expo and Spiritual Expo or something. And that is going to be June 7th and 8th, I believe, up in Vancouver. I haven't been up there since probably like 5th grade on my way to Alaska, and it's gorgeous up there, so I'm excited to be back. And then also I've got a couple other like small-time expos. There's the Little Traverse Bay Purifest in October, and that's up towards Petoskey, Michigan. It's absolutely gorgeous. So if anyone just wants to take a trip away and stare at the Great Lakes with the beautiful fall colors in this really cute little Victorian town, it's like the best place to vacation if you just want to check out for a bit. And you actually get to stay in a haunted hotel. It's really neat, and the food's fantastic. So yes, I'm doing that, and then I've got a book signing event this Saturday, March 29th. At Barnes & Noble in Ann Arbor, and just planning a couple other things too. So yeah, it's just been super hectic. So I'm hoping to plan more stuff and open up my schedule a little bit. So I'm excited for that.
Well, we're happy for you, and we
I'm
can
glad
tell
you
in
took
your
the time.
we can tell in your voice you're excited about what you do. We'll let you get some sleep. It's late in Michigan, but our guest tonight, Samantha Harris. Her book, Fighting Malevolent Spirits. Go check it out on Amazon, and of course her website, MichiganPRA.com. Samantha, it was an honor to have you here tonight. Thank you so much for staying up late, and we will stay in touch and maybe get you on for a Saturday show when it's a little bit earlier.
Yeah, and have people call in and ask all kinds of questions.
Well, we got a ton of questions emailed
I know,
in.
That's true.
But the call-in ones, some call-ins are good.
Well, I'm just saying there's so many. She's got a lot of information. A lot of people like to know.
She's got a lot to cover.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Pat and Phil. You guys have a great evening and happy Friday to you. We're almost to the weekend.
Yay, finally.
You guys have a great evening. Thanks for having me on.
Take care.
It was an honor to have you here. Thanks. Take care. Bye-bye. Good night.